Hello, everyone. We finished up talking about Habakkuk last time, so we're going to be talking about some different things now. And considering everything that's going on in the world today, I'm going to be talking about worry today. So we're going to be looking at Luke chapter 12 and talking a little bit about worry to just help us think more clearly about some of these things in the Bible. So maybe some of you have tried to explain something to someone else and they just did not get it. I'm a teacher, so I experience this a lot, whether it's with a math problem or a science idea or something else. I try to explain it to them and they just don't understand it. They just don't get it. Maybe some of you have tried to do this with your parents. Maybe you've tried to explain Snapchat to them and they just didn't get it. I still remember when my wife, when we were dating, she was trying to explain to me why I should get Snapchat. And I was just like, why do I need another thing to send pictures with? I can send pictures through my messages, through text. Why would I need a completely different app to send pictures? And why would I want my pictures to disappear as soon as I sent them? I want to keep my pictures. And I just did not get Snapchat. Now I'm starting to get a little bit more. But maybe there have been things like that in your life where you've tried to explain something to someone and they just didn't get it. And really, that's how worry is. When we worry about things, it shows that we just don't get what God is trying to teach us. Whether it be we don't want to understand it, we haven't taken the time to think about it, or we don't have the faith to accept it. But it shows we just don't get some things about life when we worry. So let's start reading here in Luke chapter 12, and we're going to start in verse 22. And it says, "And he said," he is Jesus here, "to his disciples, therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, nor about your body, what you will put on. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothing." So Jesus starts off talking to his disciples, and he says to his disciples, don't worry about your life. Don't worry about your clothes, don't worry about your food, don't worry about these things. Now obviously he's not saying throw away your job and don't worry about how much you pay for these things. What he's saying is don't let these ideas, these physical things consume your life so much that you're constantly anxious and worried about these things. That's really easy to do in times like today when we have the coronavirus and a lot of people losing their jobs. Maybe some of you are thinking of going to college and you don't know if you're going to be able to go to college or not and what's going to happen with your future. Some of you, even before the coronavirus, you were just worried about whether or not you were going to be able to get a job or what was going to happen with your future. And you were worried about a lot of things, and we all worry. All of us have different things in our life and different time periods in our life when we're worried about stuff. But the first thing here that Jesus teaches us that worry doesn't get, doesn't understand, is worry doesn't get what is truly important. Many times, this isn't always true, but a lot of times the things that we worry the most about are the things that are the least important things in life, or at least are not the most important. Jesus says what the disciples were worrying about was what you will eat, or about your body, what you will put on, but he says life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. What he's trying to tell us here is that the most important things in life aren't physical. They're spiritual. A lot of times we spend a whole lot more time worrying, oh, what are people going to think about me if I wear this clothes? Or what about people going to think about me if my parents don't let me buy this type of shoe? Or what are people going to think about me if I don't have enough money to go to this Six Flags with them or to do this other thing with them? And what about if my parents lose their job and we'll have to move to a smaller house, or we won't be able to have all the stuff that I have right now? Or what if we have to cancel Netflix? Or what if we have to? And we're worried a lot about physical things. And Jesus says here, you just don't get that physical things are important. You need clothes, you need food, but they're not the most important thing. How much time do we spend worrying about our spiritual lives or about the spiritual needs of others? How much time do we worry about lost souls? Most of the time when we worry about things that really are not that important. The most important things that we should be worrying about is our walk with God, our spiritual life, and not food or clothes or things that aren't as important. So many times worry just doesn't get what's important. We worry about things that don't matter as much as spiritual things. Verse 24 says, "Consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouses nor barns, and yet God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds?" Talks here about one of really the most, we could say, disgusting birds. Ravens many times are just scavengers. They just eat whatever's out there, sometimes even feeding on dead things or things like that. And he's saying ravens, they're not going around worried about what they're going to eat next month. They just find whatever's on the ground, whatever's lying around. They don't plant. You don't see ravens with a little garden in their backyard. You don't see ravens building sheds and filling them with food to store. No, God provides for them. And he says, if God provides for these birds that really no one else cares about, in fact, most people look at as dirty and nasty and kind of a nuisance, don't you think God's going to provide for you? This is what we call an argument from the lesser to the greater. If God cares about a tiny little dirty bird like a raven, and he provides for that raven, how much more is he going to provide for people that are created in his own image? We are much more valuable than ravens. He shows this point by an understatement when he says, "Oh, how much more value are you than birds?" He says, if God takes care of the ravens, he's definitely going to take care of you. So the second thing that worry doesn't get what's important, and worry doesn't get what's valuable. Worry doesn't understand that each human being in God's eyes is more valuable than anything else in his creation. This is what the Psalms say when it says, "What is man that thou art mindful of him, and yet you have put him above all the rest of the things." Genesis 1 talks about how we're created in God's image. We are valuable. Every human being is of infinite value. Much more valuable than a bird, much more valuable than a pig, much more valuable than a whale, much more valuable than a tree. Every human being, it doesn't matter how small, it doesn't matter what their race is or their color, it doesn't matter what their abilities or disabilities, it doesn't matter what their social standing, you are valuable to God. And that should be an incredible comfort to us. Maybe no one else really knows you. Maybe you have very few people that you believe that even care about you. Maybe you think, well, I'm not very talented, I don't play any instruments, I'm not great at sports, I'm not very good at speaking, I'm not very beautiful. But you should know that you are of immense and incredible value to God. You are just as valuable as any other human being on this planet. And that's why Christ came and died in your place, because he loved you. Because you are valuable. And that should help us to not worry, because we know that we are valuable to God, more valuable than anything else in his creation. Every human being has incredible worth and value before God. Worry doesn't get what is important. Worry doesn't get what is valuable. And let's keep reading in verse 25. It says, "And which of you by being anxious can add a single hour to his lifespan? If then you are not able to do as small a thing as that, why are you anxious about the rest?" Christ goes on to say, when we sit around and worry, it doesn't help us solve problems. It doesn't give us more time. It doesn't add years to our life. In fact, it wastes time. It takes years from our life. It causes health problems. And he says here, when you worry, it's not going to help you. This can also be translated, add a cubit to your stature. In other words, it's not going to make you taller. It's not going to make you stronger. It's not going to make you better able to deal with your problems. There's a big difference between planning and worry. Planning says, okay, this is what I am facing. This is what I'm going to do about it, and then I'm going to start doing something about it. Worry just sits around saying, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? And it's really useless. And there's a third thing we see is that worry doesn't get what is important. It doesn't get what is valuable. And worry doesn't get what is helpful. Worry just does not help. Planning can help. Prayer can definitely help. Seeking counsel, seeking wisdom, seeking God's word. but worry never helps. Worry doesn't solve your problems. Worry doesn't make you stronger or better. Worry doesn't help you at all. All it does is hurt. It steals time, it steals energy, it discourages you, and it takes your eyes off of the only thing that can help you, which is God. So Christ says, stop worrying, because when you worry, it's not going to add any time to your life. It's not going to make your life better in any way. It's not going to help you solve your problems. It won't change anything for the better. So don't be anxious, don't worry. Continues on, verse 27, it says, consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin, yet I tell you, even Solomon, in all his glory, was not arrayed like one of these. But if the Lord so clothes the grass, which is alive in the field today, and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? He talks to you about Solomon. Obviously, most of you, I'm sure, know about Solomon, who was the richest king in all the history of Israel. Really one of the richest kings in all of history. It says during his time, silver was basically worthless because there was so much gold and there was so much silver. People like the Queen of Sheba came from far away to see and was just amazed at how much stuff Solomon had and how beautiful his palace is and all of the things that he made was, and how he used gold for everything, and he had so much stuff and so much beauty. And yet God says, even with all of the stuff that Solomon had, it couldn't compare to the smallest flower of the field that God takes care of. That tiny little flower that's here one day and gone the next is more beautiful, and even you could say in a sense more well taken care of than the best palace in the world. What he's saying here is that worry not only doesn't get what is important, what is valuable, what is helpful, but worry doesn't get what is trustworthy. Riches aren't trustworthy. Solomon's riches weren't trustworthy to make him happy. In fact, towards the end of his life, he got away from God and he was miserable. He had 1,000 wives, and yet he was miserable. He had so much gold and so much treasures, and yet you read Ecclesiastes and he was miserable. Having stuff won't take away your worry. Having stuff won't make everything better. The only thing that you can really trust in, the only thing that is really trustworthy is God. The one that takes care of the lilies of the field, not having all of the money and all of the fame in the world. That's not what is trustworthy. All of that is here for a moment and then gone the next. The only thing that is truly trustworthy is God. That's why it says, when you put your focus on things and what you have or what you don't have, you're showing that you don't have faith. When you're constantly worrying about having more, about being accepted, or about all of this stuff, it shows that you don't have faith. It says, trust the one that takes care of the lilies of the field. Trust God. And when you trust God, it'll take away your worry. Worry doesn't get what is important, what is valuable, what is helpful, what is trustworthy. Verse 29. It says, and do not seek what you are to eat and what you are to drink, nor be worried. For all the nations of the world seek after these things, and your Father knows that you need them. It says here, the people that are constantly worrying about their physical needs, they're acting like people who aren't part of God's family. The other nations, the people that don't know God, the people who aren't the children of God, they're constantly worried about that because they don't have a father to take care of them. But he says, if you're saved, if you're a child of God, then you have a father. And it says your father knows that you need them. When I was a kid, I never worried about whether or not I was going to eat dinner. I never worried about whether or not I was going to be able to pay the rent or whether or not I was going to be able to have clothes. I trusted my dad. I knew my dad was worried about that stuff. My dad was going to provide for me, so I didn't need to worry about that. And the same thing with us. If we're God's children, we know that our Father is rich. He has everything. And He's in control, and He's powerful, and He knows what's best for us. So why are we worried if we're part of God's family, if He's our dad? Know that your dad knows what you need and he'll take care of you. Now, again, this doesn't mean that we don't work. It doesn't mean that we don't do our best to take care of the resources God has given us. But it means after we've done our best, we trust God with the rest. We realize my Father is in control. He knows what's best for me. He's my dad, and he'll take care of me. So I don't have to worry. I'll do my part. I'll do what God asked me to do, seek his help to obey him, but then leave the rest with him. So we see here worry doesn't get what is important, what is valuable, what is helpful, what is trustworthy. And worry doesn't get what is family. It doesn't understand that if I'm saved, I'm now part of the family of God, and my Father knows about my needs, and he'll take care of me. And then finally, to finish off, verse 31, it says, instead, seek his kingdom, and these things, food, clothes, all of that, will be added to you. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the needy. Provide yourself with money bags that do not grow old, with a treasure in the heavens that does not fail, where no thief approaches and no moth destroys. We could add there, where no looter steals. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Finally, we see here Christ is saying, focus on the eternal. Talks here about God's kingdom a lot in the New Testament and even in the Old. Talks about God's kingdom. And we can say that God's kingdom is already and it's not yet. What does that mean? Well, it's already in the sense that Christ has already come. And Christ has already started to establish his kingdom in the hearts of those who accept him. And that's what we should continue to do. Continue to put him as king in our lives and encourage others to put him as king in our lives. But one day Christ will return and he will establish his physical earthly kingdom on this earth. And that's what we mean by the kingdom is not yet. There will come a day when Christ returns and he will establish his kingdom once and for all. And it says here, we need to be looking forward to that day. We need to be living for the things that last forever, living for God's kingdom. And then God will take care of the rest. So it says, verse 33, instead of constantly worrying about getting more stuff, it says we should be willing to share our stuff. Share what we have with others, realizing that the most important treasures are not what I have right now that people can steal or that will get old and get holes or will burn up, but the things that last forever, the eternal treasures. It says, because where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. If what you treasure most in this world is video games or friends or clothes or TV shows, then that's where your heart's gonna be. That's what you're gonna be thinking about. That's what you're gonna be worrying about. But if what you treasure most is Christ and his kingdom and more people coming to know Christ and to place themselves under the authority of Christ and recognize him as the king, then that is where your heart is going to be. Your heart is going to be with Christ in eternity. And this is the last thing that worry doesn't get. Worry doesn't get what's eternal. So I challenge you guys, when you're tempted to worry, when you're tempted to fret, go back to this passage and study it and realize that when you're worrying, you're not really understanding what God has taught us. You're not really getting it. You're not getting that what is truly important is the spiritual, not just my physical needs. You're not getting what is truly valuable, that you are the most valuable thing, created thing in the universe. You're not getting what is helpful, the fact that worrying never adds anything to your life, it just takes away. You're not getting what is trustworthy, that having stuff is not what you should put your trust in, but instead you should put your trust in God. You're not getting what is family, that God is your Father and he will take care of you. And you're not getting what is eternal. You're focusing on things that really don't last, and you're treasuring things that shouldn't be your treasure, instead of treasuring eternal things in God's kingdom. So I challenge you guys, don't worry. Do your best with what God has called you to do. Take your burdens to God and trust God to take care of the rest. May God bless you.